The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
The first item on the agenda is the approval of the official agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if it please you and other members of this board, I'd like to take up item number on board business, items number F and G after 1 on the electric department. If you don't mind, please, sir.
F
And G after number 1.
And move it to where, Roy?
Electric department after the request for authorization to implement the TVA rate increase.
Okay.
If you just let it follow.
Move it
Put it right
back
behind
then,
that.
I believe.
Yes,
Is
sir.
that right?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor and Board, for your consideration of the following items, possibly for inclusion on a consent agenda, all the way to page 4. Item C, courts, number 1. This is Roman numeral 11. Page 5, E, engineering and streets, all 4 items. F, fire department, all 3 items. G, personnel, all 2 items. H, police, all 4 items. And those things for your consideration for inclusion in a consent agenda.
Any other recommendations? With those items added to the agenda for consent purposes, do we have an approval of the official agenda tonight? Moving the items under board business of presentation of the renderings and consideration of advertising bids under electric department after 1 and 2.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of the approval of the official agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes. Tonight, I would like to join and all of you giving official condolences to the friends and family of Corporal Robert Taylor McDavid, who was killed in the line of duty in Iraq, one of our native residents of this community and sons, and grandson of a former mayor. I'd also like to commend our police department for its response in assisting the City of Columbus in the shooting of an officer that they had several weeks ago. That's very commendable. We got a letter of appreciation from them. And today I got 24 letters from a young class of students in the 4th grade in regard to recycling in the city of Starkville. And we'd like the mayor and all the Board of Aldermen to come up and speak to them. Not really, I just thought I'd add that.
What time? When and where?
Well, we'll let Ms. Tindall work that out, but those comments I hope are taken by the board and the citizens. At this time, we are opening our agenda for citizen comments.
Mayor, you skipped section 4.
Did I? I must have done that on purpose. Okay, the approval of the minutes of the City of Starkville Board of Aldermen recess meeting of February the 19th, 2008.
I move approval of the minutes of our recess meeting, February 19, 2008.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. I went right through that and gave my comments, didn't I? Okay, I won't repeat that. It's now open for the floor for the citizens' comment. This time you have your 3 minutes to complain or praise or whatever you'd like to do. Tell us who you are and what it's all about.
I'm Walt Starr. I'm from Columbus. formerly from Starkville. I practice in Columbus and have been practicing in Starkville to just recently I'm relocating my office. And honorable mayor, members of the board, I was just like to request, and I could attach a letter for y'all's review, that I be granted a building permit from a paradigm office at 974 Highway 12 Extended. I understand it's a preliminary plat to that piece of property, and the final plat approval is pending upon completion of the utilities, which are in process. My contractor for the dirt work and curbs and all that stuff is the same contractor that's doing the roads in that process, and he wants to do it all at the same time, and I'm prepared to initiate the construction of my building upon issuance of the permit.
And so is there a delay?
Yes, I can't get a building permit because of, it's a preliminary plat, and you've already issued a permit to the Federal Land Bank, and if Ben would have to answer this, but y'all only allow one permit per piece of property, even though the properties have been sold and deeded and that sort of thing. So I'm asking to have a variance for that.
Okay. Ben, you got some comment on this?
Yes, sir, I provided a letter to the board and commercial development and the buildings are in place, so the project's put in place. As Mark said, the work can be done by the same contractor as the and there's no problem with the final plat being done within the next 30 to 60 days. So the final plat is in place.
Thing I'm kind of messed up with, this is something that would normally come under Building Codes and Planning Department, and I don't see that in here.
Yes, sir. The reason I asked Dr. Starr to do another citizen comment is that this just came up Friday, or actually, his contractor submitted the permit late Wednesday afternoon. We started looking at it on Thursday and realized what the issue was, and contacted Dr. Starr. He came over Friday morning and we discussed it, and thought the best way to get it on the agenda was to do another citizen comment.
Interesting approach.
Is a board order required, Mr. Mayor or Ben, to, well, then I'd move that we allow a building permit to be issued for Dr. Starr with the following stipulations, that the construction plan package shall adequately address all outstanding building and site plan issues prior to the issuance of the building permit, including submittal of an erosion control plan. 2, that a landscape plan be provided to the city planner for review within 90 days of the board's approval to ensure compliance with our landscape ordinance. And then finally, a certificate of occupancy would not be issued until the final subdivision plat has been recorded at the office of the Chancery Clerk.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any reason for further discussion? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Does that mean I get a discount on my next implant?
No, sir. Prices just went up.
Yeah.
No, sir. Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Thank you, board.
Okay, Alvin, how are you tonight?
I'm all right. Like, good evening to the mayor and board of aldermen. The citizen just have a couple of things. Springtime and a lot of people do not know that we have a noise ordinance, and it's very irritating. And the junk vehicle ordinance is getting complicated. If people do not know where the code enforcement or the police that tow the cars away, and it's kind of confusing to them. And we'd just like to thank you all for giving us our sidewalk back. It's much easier. And you all have a happy Good Friday and Easter.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Mayor, I'm Clyde Pritchard, Pritchard Engineering. Here on behalf of Mr. Jim Lindsay and Lindsay Development related to the Links project on New Light Road. As many of you know, for quite some time, we've been trying to resolve water supply to this development. The the ultimate solution through the Department of Health and others has been to install a new 12-inch line, basically from a point of connection up to the development along New Light Road. We had initiated installing that line within the right-of-way of New Light Road, which is in the city right-of-way. We since learned that we need permission to be within that right-of-way as a utility, and by letter of yesterday, we forwarded that request for access within that right-of-way to the mayor. An alternate location for this line does exist, but it's been our understanding for quite some time now that the preferred location of the line for the future, for all parties involved, would be within the right-of-way. So our request is simply to act on our request to locate that line within the right-of-way. We are under construction. We are incurring some cost in doing that. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to address those at this time.
Counsel, do you have something to say?
Mr. Pritchard, I just would ask, if you would, for the board, and the board's not going to be asking any questions, we're going to discuss this later in executive session, but if you would clarify for the board your statement about the alternate location, you were under the impression by who that this was the preferred location? By the city? Or
Yes,
would you clarify that statement?
Just for quite some time, we've been bouncing this back and forth from service to.
I'm familiar,
Yeah.
very familiar
Yeah,
with all of
very
it.
familiar,
My question
but-
simply is, clarify for the board what you mean by the statement that you made, that it was the preferred location of all the parties.
We feel, as Pritchard Engineering,
Okay.
based on our conversation with all parties,
The city included?
the city included,
Okay.
that at some point in time in the future, it may be 10 years from now, it may be 20 years from now, but that the preferred location of this line would be within the right-of-way of New Light Road, so that it would be easily acceptable. Understanding that if at some point in time, there may be some transition from one water association to the city. And we believe that to be true.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Any other questions?
Any other requests from citizens?
Mayor, may I be recognized a moment?
Go ahead.
You kind of skipped over where you kind of rushed through the comments by mayor and board of aldermen. I had a comment real
Well, we'll
quick.
go back to you and let you make your comment.
I was just going to take a moment to congratulate some of the work that's being done on the Heritage Museum. We have two representatives from the museum here tonight. They've been doing an excellent job. It looks great already, and there's still a lot of work ahead for them, and I just want to congratulate them on a job well done.
Anyone else? It brings us to public appearances. The first public appearance tonight is a presentation by Jeremy Tabor regarding a request to remove and replace the fence on the north side of the project on Jarnigan and the south side of the Cemetery Road. Jeremy, how are you tonight?
Doing great.
Go ahead if you'd like.
Okay. My name is Jeremy Tabor, and I'm the general contractor for the project on Jarnigan Street, 36 Jarnigan Street. This particular project is going to consist of two buildings in between the cemetery and the church on Jarnigan. There was an existing fence on the north property line that separates the city cemetery from this piece of property. Currently, there's a elevation cut that's going to be made on the property line, that a retaining wall will have to be put for the retainage of the dirt elevation. In doing that, there's an existing chain link fence that is on the property line, and the owners of the project would like to request that upon removal of that fence, to put up the retaining wall, that instead of replacing it with a chain link fence, they could come back with a 6-foot wood fence that would be of shadow box design. Shelton Jones Architectural Firm are the architects. You'll see on this drawing that they actually incorporated the wood fence with retaining wall. So it would be a permanent structure that would be perpetually maintained by the Jarnigan Street Condo Association. Their request, I think, is for a couple of things. One, to enhance the beauty of the fence, and two, with that retaining wall being there, that other fence had to be down. So it was a good opportunity to make this request. So I guess I'll leave this open to the board to discuss.
Did you have any questions?
No, I have a comment.
Okay, I'd like to hear your comment.
I think the developer is certainly free to put whatever sort of fence he wants on his side. But we would like to change this fence back in the cemetery simply for the maintenance thing. You can tell me that you're going to maintain it, and I won't be here to see it right, but I would like not to have somebody else deal with that problem.
Would there be a problem, put it back on the other side of the wood fence?
No, sir.
Would that resolve?
That would be what I would request.
Okay. Board, have any questions?
Ben, any comment on this particular request?
No, sir. I think what Mr. Kay was recommending, I think will enhance the site of development.
He has it done on the south side, and it looks reasonably well.
And we're simply saying, take down the chain link, construct a shadow box fence, and as Ms. MacArthur has suggested, replace the chain link on the cemetery side.
On the cemetery side.
Is that correct?
He doesn't have any problem with it.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure the owners would prefer not to, but if that's what we need to do, that's what we need to do.
All right, I would move that the city grant authorization for removal of the chain link fence at the specified site, construction of the shadow box fence that is proposed, and replacement of the chain link fence on the cemetery side.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Stewart, we got a proposal from you regarding the modification exception to the city's burn plan.
If it's okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna let Mr. Jack go before me.
You think he's gonna bring you credence in this?
I spoke with him earlier today, and he said.
I said, well, Jack, come on up and get in the fire.
I don't really know how to take that.
Yeah.
All right, Mayor and Board, thank you for your time. I appreciate you allowing me to be here. I'm here on behalf of the Oktibbeha County Economic Development Authority to request that you consider a one-time burn ban lifting for us in Cornerstone Park. When we cut the timber, about the time we cut the timber is when you instituted the burn ban. Since that time, I have found out that it costs $450 an hour for a chipper. You add that to a dozer, and our best estimate is between $30,000 and $40,000 to burn the debris. We would be willing to work very closely with Mr. Mann, the people who live on Bluefield Road, the airport, to have a good time to make the burn that I'm suggesting. That would allow us to salvage $30,000 to $40,000 that we can use to put in the preliminary street outline. We have the street surveyed for that site, for the north part of the park, but we haven't made the cut yet. So it's a simple request that you allow us to have a one-time burn ban lifting for Cornerstone. I'd appreciate your consideration. Any questions?
Roger, where are you? Hiding back there on the back wall? Any comments, Roger?
No, sir, other than if we do this, obviously, we're gonna open the gates to everybody making requests. We're gonna do whatever the board directs us to do as far as the permit.
Well, it'd save the citizens and taxpayers' money is about 40,000, which is a pretty good chunk of change. The wood is not green, and doesn't green wood give off more smoke than dry wood? It would burn very quickly, wouldn't it?
Dry wood will burn much faster, it'll put off less smoke.
There are no large pieces, these are the tops. You've been by the site, haven't you?
I've been through the Cornerstone Park several times.
Well, what we would do, if we were allowed to do it, would be to, of course, roll it up and burn it. If we have to take the alternate route, which would be chipping it, you can't sell the chips after you chip. Once they take the truck to deliver them somewhere, it eats up the cost or the revenue from the chips. So there's no salvage value to the chips. And like I say, that's an estimate by us. We don't know how well it would go. There's one chipper available in this area, and that would be our best alternate that I can come up with. So we're looking at it from the expenditure of the tax revenue of the city and county and the benefit that it would be to us. So we would respectfully request that you consider it.
Okay. Any questions, any of the Alderman?
Mr. Mayor and Boyd, you will recall the considerable problems we had with burning of debris around the city, particularly in Ward 3 and everything that occurred there, which was in part the impetus toward the burn ban. As is the case with everything, there needs to be an even-handed and realistic approach to things. For your consideration, I would propose not just a complete lifting of that burn ban, but let individuals that wish a burn permit appear before the board in a public appearance. The citizens of surrounding areas have a chance to appear and so forth, and do this on a case-by-case basis.
Mr. McLaurin, I support the offer motion.
I would then move that the city, on a case-by-case basis, case-by-case before the Board of Aldermen, lift the burn ban, to be decided on this case-by-case basis, not a general lifting of the burn ban, but that everyone wishing a burn permit would appear before the Board of Aldermen in a public appearance to explain exactly what it is they wanted to do. This will require individuals, of course, to give thought to whatever it is they might be doing and make the appearance in a timely fashion to help facilitate whatever it is they may be doing. Chief, any thoughts on that?
Which guidelines would we be following? We're gonna live and follow the former guidelines?
Of what, burning trash?
Commercial burning.
Did you not have some new kind of confangled way to burn this before we put a ban on it?
You
Like
had
a
some
pit burn or
proposed new
something like that?
guidelines, did
Yeah.
you not?
Yes, we did. But those new guidelines weren't ever addressed or voted on. So right now, the guidelines that we banned last August are the older
Old
guidelines
ones.
that's been in place since 1994.
Interesting.
Well, I would make my request based on the assumption that if you would allow us to do this on a one-time burn ban, that this would be fully cooperative between us and Mr. Mann, obviously.
And you would certainly have no objection to utilizing the new or revised guidelines.
No, we're looking for a better way to preserve the cost of, or to lower the cost of doing away with debris. We could also pick a good time. This site, and one reason I'm making the request, is certainly not close to much residences, and we'd be respectful for the three or four that are on Bluefield Road. But at any rate, we'd be glad to cooperate with the fire department, and should. And Absolutely glad to do that.
Chief, in the packet, is there not a sheet outlining the new?
It is, the new is, and this particular site's not gonna have any issues meeting
The
those
new,
guidelines.
right. Well then, let me rephrase that motion. It was not seconded, was it?
No, sir.
Yeah. That the city adopt the new revised guidelines for commercial burn permits as outlined in the fire chief's memo here and in his permit process here, and that still burn permits be granted by the Board of Aldermen on a case-by-case basis, depending on what is proposed and where and so forth.
Second.
Have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
And, Mr. Mayor, having said that, then I would move that the city grant a one-time burn permit that Mr. Wallace is requesting relative to the Cornerstone Industrial Park.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Davis.
Now, Ms. Davis, he didn't do much speaking for you, did he?
He did a lot of it.
I'm Stuart Davis, owner of Stuart Davis Construction, general contractor for residential building here in Starkville. I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the board for seeing me this evening. I just wanted to reiterate what Mr. Jack said tonight. I do feel like there needs to be a compromise. I feel like there are situations where the burn ban could be lifted, and I also understand there's a situation where you can't burn. I understand that. I'm in the business of trying to sell Starkville, Mississippi, which isn't hard to do. Starkville's got a lot going for Starkville, Mississippi, the city of Starkville. And the fact is, once I just used for an example, a couple came out of Valdosta, Georgia. The air base shut down in Valdosta, so he's working in Columbus at the Air Force Base. But he is used to a college town, being in Valdosta, so he liked Starkville. But he picked a lot out in Phase 11, Greenbrier, like 326. And 4 County had pushed some debris on 326, and then the sewer had pushed a lot of tree debris on 326. Well, besides him paying a lump sum for the lot, of course, he's got to pay to get those trees hauled off. I've met with Harry Bell. He's not willing to work anything towards the tree removal. I just feel like, you know, if I can get Randy Barman, the guy that's looking at that lot, to commit, and then he and I come in next month and present this to the board, I feel like with Mr. Mann and y'all's input in certain situations that it can be lifted. I'm here with some other contractors here, and we all have the same concern. I have a letter here from the Golden Triangle Home Builders Association that, you know, we are in competition with other towns, and I feel like we've got to get there to continue the growth of Starkville, just to have a competitive edge where there is a situation where we could burn and help the individual. It's not so much helping the contractor, because that buck gets passed to the individual as far as the home buyer. So I'm just trying to look out for the people that are coming to Starkville to live. And I don't really have anything to present as far as a yay or nay tonight, but I feel like next month I'll have Randy. I'm also looking at another lot in there with another couple. I'll keep that name to myself for now, but I know that's an issue. There's a lot of money that's involved before we even get started to put a foundation in. So I just appreciate y'all working with Mr. Jack, and I feel like with Mr. Mann looking at each individual case, I feel like we can make this thing work. Just want to thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing y'all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, and I would add, of course, inherent in all this is if anybody is requesting any such thing, they coordinate this request through the fire department and then bring it to the Board of Aldermen.
and I believe his request is in Ward 3. Is that where everybody gets really riled up over there?
The people of Ward 3 certainly get offended with things that have occurred.
Make sure the
relative to
wind will
burning.
be coming out of the north. Make sure that,
Thank you.
sure. Brings us down, I believe, to that concludes our presentations to our public hearings, and we have a second public hearing on the repeal and replacement of the solid waste ordinance. How you doing tonight?
Mayor, Board. This is the second public hearing for the Mayor and the Board of Aldermen to consider prior adoption of an ordinance repealing and replacing solid waste ordinance number 2007-7. You have in your packets two drafts of the proposed ordinance. The first is draft 3, which includes the revisions from ordinance 2007-7, identified with strike-throughs and double underlines. At the March 4th Board of Aldermen meeting, the ordinance was referred to the Rubbish and Trash Committee for consideration, and their recommendations are identified with bold strike-throughs and double underlines. There's also a clean draft titled Final Draft in your packets if the board sees fit to adopt the proposed ordinance. If you follow along, I will briefly review the highlights of the revisions of the draft ordinance. At the bottom of page 2, the definition of container has been clarified. On page 8, the prohibited section has been significantly revised to make it as crystal clear and simply understood as possible. This section is the main one utilized by the code enforcement inspector for the violations of the ordinance. Section 5E, number 1, prohibits corrals. The code enforcement inspector has identified 17 and removed 16. The last one is made of bricks and is being converted into a storage shed. Number 2 allows bagged garbage to be placed in a plastic bag refuse container with the lid at curbside at sunset the day before the scheduled collection day, and then removed by sunset the day of the scheduled collection day. This was done to accommodate the concerns of our elderly residents who wish to place their garbage out the night before and to accommodate daylight savings time. Section 5E3 calls for placement of bagged garbage to be placed at the curb on the scheduled collection day between the hours of 6 o'clock and 7 o'clock a.m. This is to ensure pickup on the scheduled collection day. Section 5E, number 4, directs the code enforcement inspector to issue notices of violations, and Section 5E5 authorizes the mayor and the Board of Aldermen to levy fines and penalties for repeat violations. Most of the remaining corrections in bold, double line, underlines are corrections and clarifications mainly pertaining to the revised definition of container back on page 2 and other minor clarifications and corrections. If you would please turn to page 9 of the ordinance, section 7, number 3, container pads. As of recently, we have revised the container pads as far as the inches, the centers, the roll off, the what do you call them, the pull-up pollards. We've the city planner, Mr. Griffin, and his staff has revised, and you should have in your packet, the sketchings of the new slab. The thickness has changed. The pollards has changed. Instead of having steel in them, they'll be concreted. And I'll leave this up to him to explain what he's done.
If you look at at your seat, you should have a drawing, and on the other side is a selection from the text of the ordinance. And if you look down to the bottom, you can see there's some enlarged font, some revisions that have been made We've just recently had an issue develop with a dumpster pad that was for a restaurant and required the bollards, required the drain, and we felt like that they needed to be clarified. So what we did was we discussed with Mr. Webb and had some input, and also with revising the drawing that we have, the detail that we provide to contractors and builders when they actually install the dumpster pads, clarifying the type of drain and the type of fixture, and also the type of the bollard. And also, if you look at the very bottom of the page, it talks about the size of the bollard, how much above and below the ground filled with concrete, so that it will be able to withstand abuse of a dumpster or a truck hitting the bollards and not have to be replaced every time they're bumped into. I think the detail is much more specific and clear from what we had previously been providing, and again, the text in the ordinance reflects what's in the what's been provided on the detail sheet. One other item that I need to bring up with the board this evening is regarding the enforcement of the violations. When the original ordinance was adopted, the board directed the code enforcement staff to issue 3 violations, and then on the 4th violation to notify a property owner, on the 5th violation to bring forward for a hearing. We've been doing that. We've had several come to the board. We actually have 2 that are scheduled for April 1st. Now we have a hearing officer ordinance that's in place. I believe the hearing officer position was advertised in the Sunday paper. I believe Mr. Boyd's going to advertise it again in the very near future. We need to make sure that we understand that, and we're having a transition here from the board reviewing these to a hearing officer reviewing these violations. And what we have discussed internally is to utilize a 3-part ticket for violations. For every violation, 1 ticket would go to the violator or be left on the door if they're not home. 1 would be sent to the property owner, and the 3rd one would go into the file, which, if it comes, the first one is a notice. The second one is actually, there's a fine involved. So using that 3-part ticket is just like the issuance of a parking ticket or along those lines. So we feel like that will resolve the issue of any types of notices for violations or notices to appear. I would also recommend that the board consider that any pending or forthcoming violations, including the ones that we have coming up on April 1st, possibly be referred to the hearing officer for action. We have those 2 items that are scheduled to be heard. We have other violations that are in various phases, between 1 and 4 violations that haven't yet hit that 5th one to require hearing by the board. And we feel like that if y'all can give us some guidance on how to address that, it'll make the transition from the board to the hearing officer a little smoother. So basically, I've come up with maybe 3 alternatives. And the first one is to wipe the slate clean of all the violations that are currently on the books. If we start over and then start with 0 with a new hearing officer, that's not really a good option. I mean, although it is an option, it's not a real good one, because it basically lets everyone start over, and folks that have accumulated these violations get to continue to accumulate those violations. Second is to allow the violations to stand, and then what that would occur is that if they had 2 or 3 violations, that would mean that the 3rd or 4th notice that they get is the first one to appear in front of the hearing officer. And with the fine schedule, that means that their first violation, they're going to get a $100 fine. So then again, that's a little bit, not as much, but still a little bit along the lines of not being too fair, depending on where folks are in the process. And the third thing to consider would be that all previous violations count as one single warning, so that they're not wiped away, but that they're not placed further along the line, so that when a new hearing officer comes on board and we issue a violation, they come before the hearing officer and they've already had 1 warning, whether it's 1 or 4, and then they automatically come in with that 2nd violation, which is where the fine has occurred. So those are 3 options that we've been discussing internally of how to address this, and we wanted to let the board give us direction on how to proceed, and also with the hearing officer that's going to come on board, how we transition from the board hearings to the hearing officer. So I was hoping that y'all would give us an idea tonight on how to do that with the transition. That has a little bit to do with the ordinance that we have at hand, but it also how it's going to be enforced
with the hearing officer.
Then what does it have to do with the ordinance at hand? Nothing in terms of the language of the ordinance.
Not
is
with
it?
the ordinance, but how the violations are going to be handled from
I understand,
transitioning of the hearing
We're talking about
types.
two different things.
We are,
Okay.
but they're related.
I understand. I'd like to see these proposals and things that you have just reeled off in writing, so we have a chance to consider these things. It may be some time before a hearing officer is actually appointed. We need to better understand this, and our purpose tonight was consideration of this ordinance, which, while has some relationship, has no relationship to the actual adoption of the ordinance.
Well, we are somewhat in limbo with, we have a fine schedule approved for one thing that's different from what the board had initially set up, so we do need to resolve this.
But we can proceed as presently set up, and then discuss any type of transition issues if they exist. You don't just stop everything, wipe it clean, everything's on hold, so forth. You proceed as we currently are proceeding, and then make a transition.
Plus, this is a public hearing tonight strictly for the sanitation.
For the adoption of the ordinance,
Adoption of the ordinance, not necessarily setting up the other issues you're bringing up in.
Right, really a separate topic.
Well, the enforcement of violations is, but the other part was with the additions and revisions for the dumpster pad and the bollards, et cetera. Because we've had, just like I said, we've just had the first one that's come up, and we had to clarify it. And this has come up since your packets were prepared on Wednesday. So I wanted to bring that up, and at the same time, you know, we're in the process of preparing.
That's addressed in the ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Specifically.
Yes, sir, it is.
Right.
But I wanted y'all to be aware of that, so that when we do bring that up in the future, I thought that this would be an appropriate time while we're discussing the solid waste ordinance, just to bring it up, to make you aware of it.
Bring
I
it
don't
up and
expect
aware
y'all to
of
give
it.
us, I don't expect y'all to give any direction tonight. But I want to bring it up while we're discussing the solid waste ordinance, because how it's enforced and how it's going to be heard is going to be coming up in the future. I didn't want to dump it all on y'all at one time.
For information stuff.
Yes, sir.
That certainly is appropriate.
Yes, sir.
But not for action tonight.
I got a question on the ordinance.
Okay, certainly. Let me ask one more question, Matt, if I may. Does the, and we got all sorts of drafts here, does the one that says final contain this?
It does not. Like I said, that was all prepared on Wednesday, and this has come up since Wednesday. It's been the first one that's come up from scratch with the new ordinance of how to address a dumpster
You know,
pad
about
for a
Wednesday
restaurant
of last
location.
week.
Yes, sir. So it's not included in either the draft 3 or the final draft. That's why I gave it to y'all separate on this sheet, so that it could be easy to reference. But we could easily input that in if y'all chose to adopt the ordinance, it could be easily included in the final version.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Roy.
Mr. Griffith, learn from Alderman Lawrence saying, you know, whenever we take these things up, you know, we don't need to see 5 or 6 different versions. If we're gonna have a public hearing, we need to have everything consolidated in one draft. It gets confusing. That's what the gentleman from 3 was saying, you know, we don't need to consider the different options. I mean, that's not what we're having. We're having a public hearing for this, and in the future, I would like to see all this consolidated into one document. So we'll be looking at all 5 or 6 pieces at the table. It's just not a good way of doing business.
And from what you're asking here, sorry to interrupt you, Roy, it sounds like it'd be like a working session. You
Yes,
want
sir.
us to
Yes,
give comment and input, and I don't think the board is of a frame of mind tonight to put input in for the depth that needs to be put in at this particular time.
I understand for the enforcement. I just wanted to bring it up while we're talking about solid waste ordinance, because that's something that the board's going to need to consider. And I'd rather the board be advised of it tonight than having to dump it all on the board at one time. But as far as the revisions to the part about the bollards and all, that's come up since these packets were prepared. And that's why I presented it on a separate page with a drawing.
With then, excuse me, you have a question.
But
Go ahead.
I just want, before, if I was going to make any type of motion on, Sharon, on section 12 on page 13, it says certain things that are unsuitable for collection. And then under letter H, I wasn't exactly certain if that fit within that definition, or if I just meant it, because it says, city sanitation department shall not collect or remove in any quantity the following. And then letter H says, loose litter shall be collected and placed in appropriate containers for collection by the city. So are you saying that we're gonna collect that, or that we don't pick up loose litter? And it may just, I'm just confused by what it says. And I've read it a couple times and I'm getting a little confused.
Yes. City of Starkville Sanitation Department does pick up loose litter out of if the bag is there and the garbage has been torn, we will pick up the loose litter around that bag at that particular area. As far as picking up loose litter on down the easements of the city or on private property, no, we do not.
And you're saying that loose litter needs to be containerized?
Containerized.
In order to be picked up by the city?
In order to be picked up.
Other questions?
For clarification purposes then, would it be feasible then just to amend H to say loose litter that is not in an appropriate container?
Or something.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear y'all.
Then just for clarification purposes, I was just suggesting maybe we have H say loose litter not in an appropriate container.
That makes sense.
It makes a lot. Thank you very much.
Let's change that wording then.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Loose litter not in containers shall not be picked up by the city. Is that what you said?
Right.
Loose litter not in a container. Okay, no, sir. No, sir. That's not what we're saying. We don't pick up loose litter.
Period.
Period.
I understand.
Okay? So if it's in a container, if it's containerized in a bag or whatever, it's not loose. But if it's in a garbage can and it's loose litter in there, we do not pick that up. It has to be bagged.
To me, it says it, loose litter shall be collected and placed in appropriate container
But not
for collection by the city.
by the city.
While we're pondering that, do we have any input from the citizens? Richard?
Confusing me.
I'm confused about why we're waiting for the scope flies off the tire. I have to go back and back and back. I think there was violation 5 times on that. That's a basic time. I mean, how many times you have to be notified if you're a violation before you get a citation? 5 times. To me, that's ridiculous.
Richard, that's the old ordinance. The new one streamlines that process where we have one warning and one fine, but we have to wait until we have that administrative process. One, the ordinance to go into effect, which is 30 days from March 4th. And then 2, that we need to have an adjudication process to make that happen. Well, the old ordinance that we passed back in October, I guess, we gave people 4 notices prior to them coming to the Board of Aldermen. And then when they do come to the Board of Aldermen, we hear the case. In the previous cases we've heard, the problems have been fixed, and we retire them to file.
Not in this new ordinance, it doesn't.
Not in this ordinance at all. Two different topics.
We've got 2 different things going on here because it's not this ordinance.
It's not in this document either.
Well, that's what we brought to
Then he said
him
it was
that's
for information
confusing the issue here, okay? Do any of my other members have questions to ask Clyde? Milo, y'all got questions to ask in regard to this?
So what you're saying is, that if I put a garbage can, loose garbage out on the street on pickup day, sanitation would not pick it up, that'd be.
That's loose litter. Loose litter.
Loose litter, that's correct.
It would have to be in a bag before we.
That's right.
Pick it up, not.
But now if a raccoon or a chicken or something like that packs into the bag and it gets garbage out around it or whatever, they'll pick up the garbage around that loose bag and the bag itself. Am I not right about what you're saying?
That's correct. I'd like to clarify something. Alderman Cox.
Yeah.
Alderman Cox. Excuse me. And Alderman Davis. Corey.
Thanks.
Number H, loose litter shall be collected and placed in appropriate containers for collection by the city or its designated contractor. I believe that is an appropriate, and it's a statement itself as to what needs to be done.
We have not changed anything.
No,
Sheriff.
I would not like to change it.
We have not changed anything.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any other citizens would like to make a comment pertaining to the ordinance of the second hearing on the repeal and replacement of the new solid waste ordinance? If not, I bring the hearing to a conclusion.
Mr. Mayor and Board, I would move adoption of ordinance number 2008, whatever the sequence number is, an ordinance repealing and replacing ordinance number 2007-7 to revise the solid waste and sanitation ordinance for the city of Starkville, Octavia County, Mississippi, with the substitution of this portion of section 7, the drawing, for the appropriate portion of section 7 in this draft.
Thank you.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion with a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ben, this is the first public hearing to consider a proposed ordinance repealing and replacing Ordinance Review Committee and establishing the division for a site review plan. I believe that's you. This is our first public hearing, so the public will be involved in this if they wish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The draft ordinance that's before you this evening has been drafted at the request of the board's last meeting to propose a revision or a repeal and replace of ordinance number 2002-3 governing site plan reviews. We took the opportunity to also formally establish a development review committee, which is composed of the various department heads as well as the utility providers around the city for electricity as well as cable and telephone service. Currently, the ordinance requires certain stipulations where that a site plan review is reviewed by staff, then goes to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and then comes before this board for approval before a building permit can be applied for. The main portions of this ordinance concern establishing the Development Review Committee, their processes, how they review plans, and what those plans need to include when they're submitted to the city for review and approval. If the plans meet all of the city's ordinances and regulations, if the zoning is in place, they're not asking for any type of waiver or modification or any type of variance, this ordinance allows the Development Review Committee to approve those plans. And again, because they meet all the city's requirements, all the ordinances, all the regulations, without any type of review or approval by the Planning and Zoning Commission or by the Board of Aldermen. However, if a plan is submitted and requires, or the applicant requests some type of modification or a waiver or a variance, a dimensional setback variance, that plan would need to come before the Board of Aldermen, or if in the case of a dimensional variance, would need to go to the Board of Adjustment and Appeals, just like any other variance would go. So what this intent is to expedite the development review process for site plan approvals, and we estimate that it would cut 4 to 6 weeks off of that time that's spent to meet the public meeting requirement, especially for the Planning and Zoning Commission, because they meet once a month. The board's a little more flexible. Y'all meet twice a month, so there's an opportunity to place something on an agenda a little more timely than the Planning and Zoning Commission, which only meets once a month. I also need to point out that the Board of Adjustment and Appeals only meets one time a month as well. But we don't have too many dimensional requirements. I think we've had a handful since I've been here in the last year, so we don't have that many that come through. Again, I think what this will do is allow developers and builders to submit a plan to the staff for review that'll be complete and thorough, that staff can review and grant an approval and expedite their process towards building permitting. and actual construction. So with that, I'll just answer any questions if y'all may have any.
Does the board have any questions pertaining to this? Bottom line is that, I think the cutoff was what, 5,000 square feet? Anything over 5,000 square feet had
Yes,
to go to a review?
Yes, sir.
We've had buildings in town that have been built that were 4,999 square feet to keep from having to go for a review. And I have in mind a bank building that was done here recently that was done in a green concept that was that way, just not have to go through planning and zoning. And I feel certain that the other folks feel comparable thoughts in regard to trying to avoid going to delays. I think is the big reason that they have that, because it only meets once a month.
Yes, sir.
Do we have questions that you'd like to ask in regard to this?
And in any case, we're just simply setting this matter for public hearing
Yes, sir.
tonight.
This is the first public hearing.
Yes, sir.
And so I would move then that the city, Ms. Brough?
Mr. Devon, I think the request from last board meeting was that the public hearing be held, so this is the first public hearing advertised.
That's right, we need to have another one.
Two.
So this is the first
This is the
public
fun,
hearing?
right.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Any folks from the citizenry have a question pertaining to this? Thank you, Ben. That concludes, yes.
I just had a question. If one of the issues at hand has been the once-a-month meetings, have you considered whether or not it might be necessary to have more than one meeting a month for planning and zoning as another way of kind of resolving this issue?
We have, but again, for site plan issue, I think site plans and subdivision plats are required to go to a public meeting, to the P&Z and again to the Board of Aldermen, but they're not public hearings. You know, the public hearing schedule of once a month is a little more regimented because of the advertisement. My experience with the Planning and Zoning Commissions so far has been that they're comfortable with once a month. We've had to have one special call meeting in that time, and we barely had a quorum at that to meet that. So I don't know that they would be too willing to have a second Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, you know, with the month. And again, the volume or the number of applications that we have, I don't think would really warrant that number. It's just that, you know, I think we average anywhere from 3 to 7 items on each agenda, and that's not a real heavy agenda. So once a month would be adequate. It's just that the timing of that is what folks have had a problem with. The folks being the builders and the developers who, you know, when something has to wait 4 to 6 weeks, that's another month of interest that they have to pay on a loan. So that's something that they have to consider.
Okay.
And the attempt of all this is simply to improve our site plan review process.
Yes, sir.
Right. So we will have another, yes, you have a comment?
Yes, I do. I want to commend the planner and the Board of Aldermen, Mayor, for consideration of this. As I understand, there's 2 major points. Number one, if I want a permit, I comply with all of your ordinances. I make a request to the city builder. If I'm within those ordinances, I'm expecting approval. If I make a variance, I fully expect Mr. Griffin to take me and that proposal to planning and zoning, to the Board of Aldermen, because I've asked for a variance in your established, accepted ordinances. If I comply with all your ordinances, that's what I hear Ben say, then why should I need to visit another 6 weeks with what you've already told me to do? Thank you.
Anyone else? This concludes the public hearing for the first hearing on this proposal.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your healthcare needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in healthcare.
Which discusses the cleanup after the animals. who are being walked. We've become more urbanized. We certainly have leash laws now. People walk their dogs, and what we're finding is that they are not cleaning up after their dogs on public property and on private property that is not theirs. So Mr. Favor has looked at this, and I was looking at it today before I came before you, and I have changed it to dog or other domestic animal because there are other animals that get actually walked. Cats somewhat don't, but I think there's some other animals that
Would chickens be included in that?
well, I think they might.
Especially if they're opening up the garbage.
And hopefully they're not, because they'd be cleaning up after them. But, you know, pot-bellied pigs, for example, are one of those things. But the current park, the dog park, has the cleanup facilities, or the cleanup utensils, if you will, and I think that's essentially what we're saying. And so I have added that section to it, and also have added a couple of authorized adjudicatory body to include the folks who'll be able to listen to our administrative hearing officer will be able to listen to any of the citations that might come with it. So that's what that is about, and it's just calling for the first public hearing, which will be at the April 1st meeting.
Do I hear a motion for consideration for us to have a public hearing on this?
Mayor and Board,
Move approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Ms.
Thank you,
Brewer,
Mr.
you
Mayor.
might as well just stay there.
I've planted myself here.
The next item is item C on the board business. We take care of A and B, and I removed D because we're not considering removing the site plan tonight. We just had our request for a public hearing.
Yes, sir. It was just a presentation.
Right.
Right.
So if you would take up item C, please.
Okay, item C is the bid policy that the board passed, I think it was in October of last year. And you have both the current bid policy before you as well as the proposed. And the only change to that is to reflect that the bidding is not simply the strict adherence to bidding. It is to include quoting or otherwise proposing to do work for the city. And Marquita's folks took it literally, as I understand they should have, but what it was intended, and Mr. Favor and I put this together along with Marquita, it was intended to be any work done for the city. So I've gone back and revised it to reflect that each party, where bidder was used, party is now used, and then quoting or otherwise proposing is the language that is changed. And I also changed the date on the effectiveness to today if the board so chooses. But if you have any questions of Mr. Favor, that was our original intent, but when it got translated to bidder, it became strictly the bid process as opposed to a work process for the city.
Questions from any board members? Do we have a motion for the revision?
I would move we amend the board's policy establishing standard criteria for eligibility to participate in city jobs.
Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Nay.
Thank you, Mayor and Board. The next item E is the consideration of calling for a public hearing for replacement of the Park Commission ordinance with the new ordinance to increase the membership from 5 to 7 as currently allowed by state statute that was passed in July, or that was amended in July of 2007. And you have the old ordinance, which is on the last page of your segment in front of you, as well as a proposed new ordinance with just verbiage that includes duties and slightly a little more formalized or a little more detailed than the previous ordinance. So this is true. This is also just for a consideration of a public hearing and an opportunity for the board to look at that. Mr. Favor has also looked at that proposal, and while he was on vacation, so he may not have looked at it a lot, but I passed it by him for his discussion as well as offering it to the board between now and any public hearing to be held.
Do we have a motion concerning for a public hearing to increase the Park Commission from 5 to 7? Remember, this is strictly a public hearing.
Ms. Froy, I read through this, and I had several questions and concerns around, for example, going with the 7-year term. That seemed like an awfully long.
That's a statutory requirement. the years of the term are the same numbers of the members of the board.
Is the term limit also statutory?
Absolutely not, but if you're on there for 14 years, I was just going with maybe opportunity for you to get some fresh input.
Mr. Mayor, may I be recognized?
You may.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to vote against.
A public hearing?
Yes, sir. I'm going to tell you the reason why. The reason I'm voting for a public hearing because tinkering with this ordinance that governs the Park Commission gives an impression that there is something wrong with the commission. There's been a lot of public discussion about the operations of the Park Commission, and I don't want to vote in the affirmative to convey any negative impression to the public as if I'm showing some disapproval with the work that the commission is doing. And I'm not aware of anything that really signifies a change from the way the system currently operates. And we must remember that the people serving these commissions are volunteers who are donating their time, whether it's Park Commission, Planning and Zoning. And I think that we just need to allow the Park Commission to operate under its current system of operation without modifying, altering, or changing any aspect of the operation of this commission. So for those reasons, I'm going to vote against the public hearing and vote against on final passage. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else got anything to say? Do we have a motion to have a public hearing?
I would move, Mr. Mayor, that we hold a public hearing on the matter of increasing the membership of the Park Commission from 5 to 7 individuals. You remember earlier discussion originally proposed by Alderman Cox some time ago. You hear the discussion of representation of the 7 wards and so forth. Certainly worth a public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of us having a public hearing, please raise your hand. All those opposed to any public hearing? Okay, thank you. We'll have a public hearing.
Yes, sir.
Next item, Ms. Brewer.
It's consideration of the adoption of an events policy, which we've been bringing forward rather regularly. The changes that were made as per the last board meeting, I've included in your cover sheet there, specifically reduced cost of the application fee and then inclusion of the security deposit into the sponsorship application as requested. And I received something from Alderman Cox before I came into the meeting that I had not seen. I contacted an insurance agent to try to find out what a basic one-day policy would cost for insurance as required by the special event policy, and was given the rough amount of $500 a day, which tracks somewhat with what the information he provided me, in that depending on your attendance level, which certainly makes sense, and he has provided me with something that I don't know, Alderman Cox, did you?
Nationwide.
But did you provide it to any?
No,
Okay.
I just got it.
Which shows, essentially, if y'all will let me share, $1,500 or less is a premium of $383, $1,500 to $3,000 is approximately $740, $3,000 to $600 is $1,500, and $6,000 to $12,000, it doesn't go above $12,000, is $2,500 for a daily event. And when I had gone, I called Reynolds, and they said, well, I can give you a rough estimate, and it was $500 per day. So, but that was for a lesser number. So that's the order of magnitude that we're looking at for the insurance. And it's strictly up to the board what y'all want to do, but I think Mr. Favor was comfortable with the insurance that was required and for protection for the city, but that's in essence where we are. All the changes have been made, and the information that I just gave you verbally is the first I had seen. That was this afternoon at about 5:15, other than the $500 that I quoted to you as a part of your cover sheet for the event policy.
And of course, at the last time, I was asking about the cost of insurance
Yes.
versus the need to have a certain type of insurance.
Yes.
So again, we are confronted with the general situation of, do we think this is too high, the cost versus the need to have insurance?
How many? festivals have we been having, and how many years have we had festivals? Approximately 20-something years, 25 years?
Had festivals of whatever sort for a long, long time.
Well, I think probably the litigious nature of the folks these days made it a little different than it was 25 years ago.
That
And we
certainly
certainly are
has changed,
growing.
yes.
Well, it
Quantities
has,
of
but I
people
was
are
just
growing
hearing
as
the
well.
prices suggested if you had a crowd of 12,000 people, you're talking about $2,500 virtually.
Yes, sir. You are. You are.
Now, that's from one insurance company.
Yes, I mean, I couldn't get, I mean, I guess I said, I
understand.
called Reynolds, and Alderman Cox was kind enough to show this to me, so it only tracks in the sense that the
Right.
quantity that they had roughly was the 1,500 to 2,500, so.
What's the board's pleasure? I think after much work and much effort that has gone into there, that most of your committee members in regard to this were reasonably accepted.
That was
of
the
it.
impression I was left with. Briar Jones, who was dealing with the Starkville Area Arts Council, he represented at the meeting that he was fairly comfortable with the insurance limits as they were suggested. Now, not having had to get insurance, I didn't know, what his cost him, and he didn't share. But this may be a number that's higher, or it may be about what he's used to. It's just new information for the board to understand what's going on. I think they all have insurance. And I didn't hear, with the exception of the medical question, I didn't hear anyone say that insurance was not insurance that they were not expecting to have to get.
So do we want to move forward with the adoption of an events policy, or you want to put it off for another day?
I move approval, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second to it. All those in favor of this policy, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay.
Nay.
Let's show hands. All those in favor, raise your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed, raise your hand. It passes 5 to 2. Would you move on to the next item, please?
Yes, sir. Codification for the City of Starkville ordinances. I have pulled the information out from the archives, and the bids are still good from both the Stennis Institute and from MuniCode. And it was proposed in the budget for this past year, but was waiting until the mid-year analysis of the budget. And then it was suggested that I bring it back to the board to have another look at. And I've I've contacted both the parties, and the bids are still correct and active. Very good. So if the board so chooses this, I think one of the things that, if I could make the case for this, is for us to be progressive and for us to be received or perceived as an efficient and effective community. I think that the codification of the ordinances is one of the critical aspects. People go online and look for us first. I mean, the internet is a hugely influential piece of information, and that's where they get it first. Alderman Cox and Alderman Lincoln and I, attending that Economic Development Summit, I was struck by the fact that that seems to be where everyone goes first. And codification of the ordinances would be accessible via the online service. That's one of the things that's offered. So if the board is so inclined, I would think this would be something that we would really wish to consider as a part of our economic development effort, as well as just simply making life easier for those who wish to access our ordinances.
And simply good business. The city has done one codification
Yes,
since the beginning.
Yes, sir.
And we're long past time doing this again. I would move then that the city move to codify its municipal ordinances, and everyone realizing that this, you don't, like any book, when it's published, it's out of date type of thing. It's a continuing evolutionary process, and would move that the city contract with the first codifier of municipal ordinances, of a leading firm, nationwide firm that has been in business some 50-odd years and already has a bulk of the city's material on file in their processing system. that being Municipal Code Corporation, Tallahassee, Florida.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and,
Mr. Mayor.
Pardon me?
Just a question, do we know how much this is gonna cost? Because I've read this about 10 times, and
They're
it appeared that it was a minimum of 10,000 to start at one firm, and on the next one, I have no idea how much it's gonna cost.
The Muni Code is a base cost of $10,020, and it includes, it's on page 8 of their proposal, and it includes the bulleted items below them. Options that they include there would be 1410 for font and additional pages above the base, and a continued group of that. I think as we get deeper into it, I probably will have a harder figure, but we know that the base cost is gonna be $10,000, and then their annual
Maintenance
update,
fee.
thank you,
Update.
is, I think was $400, I believe was what was quoted in another
once they
part.
get it codified, they continue to on the update, is that not correct?
Yes, sir. I mean, if we
send them
contract,
Stuff the
right,
city adopts and
right.
they, say,
Right.
redo it.
And there are,
substitute
there are
pages,
agreements,
so
and
so
I
and so
certainly will
on.
pass this by Mr. Favor. I wasn't sure of what the board was going to do, but in terms of an agreement with them, make sure that we all understand exactly what it is we're contracting with them to do. But the $10,020 was the proposal that was provided to me originally and has been provided yet again.
Mr. Mayor, what line item is gonna come from to pay for this?
We can take it out of the board salaries, or
I just wanna know, just tell me,
probably the general fund.
just make sure we
That's
have
a
to
big
increase,
line item.
just make sure we have to increase tax.
General fund.
Codification is long overdue.
Do we, Rodney, is there any issue if we have two proposals, or we just, does the motion need to say we've accepted the best bid? How does that proceed with?
If it's the lowest bid, there's no, you don't need to set that. If it's higher bid that you're accepting, you need to explain why it's the better bid.
Counselor, wouldn't this be a professional service not subject to the bid requirements of state of Mississippi purchase law?
Professional services?
Right.
Professional
Are
service.
these professional services?
Yeah.
That would be true.
So it's not subject to bid requirements anyway.
These are professional services, that'd be correct.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. We will now vote. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All those opposed? It passes. Go on to the next item, Ms. Brooks.
I think I'm done. Well,
Okay.
I don't have to be. Here, I will.
Go ahead, let's take up this appointing of an elected official as a liaison to the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any board members that ride?
Mr.
Right,
Alderman
Halls.
Lincoln, I think, is
Oh, really?
a
Well, he
regular
would be an
attendee.
excellent. Would you mind being our public liaison person? Do I have a motion that we elect Mr. Lincoln as our representative?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. The next item is consent. That brings us down to department head. Would the
Well,
board like to have?
Mayor, you had a discussion of the structure and organization of the citizen recycling
Oh, yes,
committee
pardon
that
me.
was,
Yes.
that was requested.
And I think the purpose of that is what, to perhaps get us a chairman of that?
Well, I think we had a little bit of a confusion factor. We've got a recycling committee that consists of board members, and then we have the citizen recycling committee that consisted of some board members and some citizen participants to whom we add, or to which we added an additional person. And then we have one additional board member from the original creation, which makes 3 board members and I think now 5 citizens. I think Alderman Cox was asking that we be a little clearer on exactly what we're doing. How many, and who all is on it.
Well, we're obviously not going to have 4 board members, okay?
No, I understand, but
And
the
so,
recycling committee has 3, but we originally set this committee up, the recycling citizen committee, to include 2 board members and 3 citizens. But because the recycling committee consists of 3 board members, I don't think it was ever defined exactly who all was on it, if all 3 board members want to be on it, or if some other collection wished to be. We've also added 1 additional citizen to it, which increased the number as well.
And I think I've spoken with several of the members, and I know they want to get started, and if there's something placed on our desk, which gives a list of members that I think Tammy provided us, and if y'all are comfortable with that, then I know this group wants to get started, and get to work on providing some recycling options for the community. And I don't know if any other board members want to participate, or if the board members that are listed on the committee don't want to participate, but Alderman Davis and Alderman Lincoln were included in the Citizen Recycling Committee.
And I had thought it was a transfer of rubbish and trash in its entirety, which would include Alderman Davis, Alderman Lincoln, and
Yourself.
Right, and that's why there's some confusion.
I thought it was too.
Well, I have no objection, the same committee, the gentlemen, let's put him on there, let's approve
Yeah.
him.
Put
You willing to
Mr.
serve?
McLaurin on there. You
Yeah.
willing
Citizens
to
Award,
serve on
we have
this?
a lot of interest in that.
Would y'all like for us to appoint a chairman of this evening?
Let them appoint their own chairman, and I would move then that we.
I don't know if we want to do that. We might want to do that ourselves.
I would move that we amend the composition of the recycling committee to reflect that provided. Don't have it in front of me at the moment.
We have a second of that.
I didn't hear the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Repeat it, Richard, if you would.
I said I move that we amend the composition of the recycling committee to reflect that provided to us on the table. And I didn't have it right in front of me, so.
Including Alderman
Including,
McLaurin.
excuse me, including Alderman McLaurin.
Requested to serve.
I think so. Again, excuse me, is there a second to that motion?
Do we have a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second.
A clarification now, I was under the impression that Ms. Boyd and Mr. Sheridan were advisory.
Yes.
Okay, the list does not
Right.
indicate that, but I just wanted to clarify that.
We have a motion on the floor. You just heard it. All those in favor say aye.
Yes.
All those opposed, nay. And does the board not want to set up a chairman of this thing at this time, or you want to let them do it themselves?
We're gonna let them do it.
Let them do it
All right.
themselves.
Sharon, if you would please go ahead and say maybe a call, a meeting of this group together.
Right, the rubbish
You
and
wanna
trash
do-
committee will get.
You gonna do that?
Coordinate.
All right,
with
fine. All right.
You're certainly welcome, Ms. Boyd.
Would the board like to take a short recess?
Yes, sir.
We hit the last
Item
item on
L.
board business?
Last item is consent, I thought.
Do we?
Oh,
I don't think we made
it was not on consent.
Okay, well, why did I put it on there then? You got it marked? Yeah, I thought you had it marked too. L is on consent.
Oh, well, I don't.
It's not on
Ms.
consent.
Ms.
Well, that's
Kendall?
because something else got your interest at the time.
So, but thus I didn't call it
Do you
out.
have it on consent?
No.
Thus I didn't call it out as a matter for consent. It
Well,
may have been.
let's go ahead and take it, since not everybody right now has it on consent, but I have it on consent as well.
With the rapidly changing expense requirements from the government, there appeared to be a need to provide some additional training for each department on their submittals of expenses. And it seemed appropriate to have our city clerk lead that training for our departments. And if it pleases the mayor and board, I'd move that we authorize the city clerk to provide training for each department in the calculation and submission of travel expenditures in accordance with state requirements.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. We will now take a short recess.
The passage of time. We have shared your joy at the birth of your children, and proudly we have watched them grow. We've taken care of your health care needs during the good times and the not so good. Your parents and grandparents have depended upon us. Together we have shared the struggles and the wonders of life. At Oktibbeha County Hospital, we are celebrating 30 years of being your lifelong choice in health care.
The next item is our departmental business. Ben, if you'll start, please.
Yes, sir. The first planning and zoning item before you this evening is CU 0801, is a request by Pastor Maurice Peterson to allow a church in a C2 general business zone located at 610 Yellow Jacket Drive. The subject property is located across the street from the high school. The applicant feels that activities at the proposed church will not adversely affect those of the high school and other neighbors in the area. Planning staff has recommended approval of the request with 10 conditions, and the applicant has stated that he would be willing to comply with them. One of the conditions requires a review in 2 years to verify that the site is adequately accommodating the use as a church. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the conditional use request with the conditions proposed by planning staff.
Do we have a motion or any discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, ma'am.
if there's no discussion or no questions, I move to grant the request by Pastor Maurice Peterson to allow a church in a C2 general business zone located at 610 Yellow Jacket Drive in Ward 7.
Do we have a second to your motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Next item, Ben.
The next item is CU 08-02 is a request by Annie Coggan Crawford to enlarge an existing studio apartment into a 2-bedroom unit in a C2 general business zone located at 205 South Lafayette Street. The subject property is located around the corner from City Hall, across the street from the old sanctuary of the First Baptist Church. The zoning is C2, but the building had an existing studio apartment in the rear, which the applicant would like to enlarge while renovating the building to open a cafe in the front portion of that same building. If the apartment were to remain the same size, no conditional use would be needed, but the applicant wishes to make the apartment suitable for a more stable tenant than a studio apartment would attract. Planning staff has recommended approval of the request with 5 conditions, and the applicant has stated that she would be willing to comply with them. The Planning and Zoning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the conditional use request with the conditions proposed by planning staff.
Do we have a motion, discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
To Ben.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Her request, Ms. Crawford's request is to enlarge the studio apartment to a 2-bedroom.
Yes, ma'am.
And what's about the restaurant, cafe, or what did you
Well,
say?
the cafe is a permitted use in the C2, the apartment is not. The apartment it requires a conditional use approval, but it was already existing. If it wasn't the fact that she's enlarging an existing nonconformity, it wouldn't be an issue, but she's come forward and asked that she enlarge an existing apartment because she
Okay.
feels like it being so
That's
small,
what I
she
wanted
can
to
get a
be
good
sure. But see,
tenant.
when you said cafe, that just threw me off, and I'm going,
Yes, ma'am.
what?
The front portion of the building will be a cafe. Now, they've begun renovations, I believe, last week. They began demolition on the interior.
Now, where's this located exactly?
It's the second building on the east side of Lafayette Street, south of Lampkin.
Okay.
But the cafe has nothing to do with this
No, ma'am.
request. Okay,
No, ma'am.
all right. See, when you threw it in there, that's when you lost me.
They're just in the same building,
I'm
Is she
just-
doing
I'm
a
easy to
coffee
do.
and bakery shop there, basically?
basically.
That's where it is. Do we have a motion for this item?
Mr. Mayor, I move that we grant the request by Ann Coggan Crawford to enlarge an existing studio apartment into a 2-bedroom unit in a C2 general business zone located at 205 South Lafayette Street in Ward 7.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor of the motion with the second, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Passes. Next item, Ben.
Third item is PP 08-01, is a request by Mr. David McReynolds for a preliminary subdivision plat approval for Pat Station in an R1 single-family zone located on the western side of Old West Point Road at the intersection of Pat Station Road at the site of the former Pilkington Trailer Park. The applicant is proposing a single-family residential subdivision of 50